Hello, York Sports Network fans, and welcome back to the playoff preview show of quite possibly the biggest game in York Duke's history. It is going to be number 2 in the state, Loyola, from Wilmette, coming out here to Elmhurst to play the Dukes of York, who are ranked number 4 in the state. Big-time public school on the rise versus generational powerhouse Loyola. And this is quite possibly the biggest game in York history because this is the best team York has ever had. They just won their 12th game, which is the most ever in program history, and they have an opportunity here, a home playoff game, to move on to the first ever state final for York High School. This is a huge game, and here with Gavin Connolly, he's going to explain to us a little bit how the Dukes got here to this point and what makes them so successful.
So, yeah, one game away before the Dukes can play in Champaign for the state championship game, and what an atmosphere that would be. That would just be incredibly electric within the student section. That's all anyone has been talking about this week and last week and the week before that is just the Dukes in the playoffs and how much farther they can get and each team that they're playing. I mean, it's just been so fun having this successful football team around. But how both of these teams got there, like you said, it's actually pretty similar. So for York, they obviously started out, they were a higher seed than Loyola. So they started out, they beat Oswego East by 21. Then they went on the road and had that tough test against Marist where they squeaked that one out in double overtime in an instant classic game. And then last week, the most recent chapter was the Dukes won at home against the Palatine Pirates by a score of, I believe, 24-10.
Yep.
And that one was a little bit closer than the score suggested, but the Dukes had one of the greatest fourth quarters I've ever seen, especially on the defensive side of the football. And they were able to pull away and get the win in front of their home crowd. On Loyola's side, they started off against playing... Ooh, that's actually a good one. I got to go check that.
Right there, playing at home versus Plainfield South.
I think that was regular season, though.
No, it wasn't, because Mount Carmel was the final one.
Was Plainfield South. They beat Plainfield South by about 35. Then they went to Edwardsville, beat Edwardsville by 28, and then finally played the LT Lions, who the Dukes have also beaten. They beat them 30-17, and so now they're stacking up against the Dukes. However, Loyola has beaten their teams by an average of 25.3 points per game, which is insane for the 8A state playoffs if you're beating teams by that much. The Dukes have only beaten teams by a little under 2 touchdowns at 13.67 points, but both of the opponents are about the same. Combined, the opponent win percentage for Loyola and York in the playoffs is 73%. So pretty even playoff strength of schedule thus far. Loyola just edging out the Dukes a little bit in the margin of victory category. So going back to that Dukes versus Pirates game last week, it was quite the interesting game because the Dukes actually trailed going into the fourth quarter by a score of 10-7, I believe. Or was it 10-3? I'm going to cut this.
10.
I believe it was.
It was 10-7 because they got the safety, which made it 10-9. Because they were up 7-3. Then Palatine responded.
It was, yeah. 7-3, 10-7, 9-10-9. Yeah. Okay. 3, 2, 1. So going back to that Dukes versus Pirates game this past Saturday, it was quite the interesting game just because York actually trailed going into the fourth quarter by a score of 10-7, but they really rallied, especially on the defensive side, to win the game. It kind of started with there was a late fumble, which really kind of crushed the momentum and silenced the crowd. But then Palatine had the ball deep in their own territory. Dukes ended up getting a safety, and that really kind of just brought everyone back into it because now it's 10-9 and you're getting the ball back. Immediately after, Jake Melvin gets on a 41-yard run, and the Dukes are in business. The next play, interception. Dukes score again. Next drive, Reese Richardson seals it off with an interception. So it was just a bunch of bang plays, pair of turnovers for Palatine late hurt them. The passing game wasn't quite working. The Dukes did a great job of shutting down Dominic Ball, the junior running back that we talked about last week, who was incredible. The Dukes had everything they wanted on the ground. Obviously, it was hard to protect number 99 Jalen Phillips, but the Dukes were doing everything they could on the ground. Veza only threw the ball 8 times for 68 yards, and that was with a 47-yard screen pass. So it was just give the rock to Melvin and Watson. They were able to make good on it. And Veza as well. Actually, Veza was their leading rusher with 144 yards. So what a day for him. The offensive line continues to run block well, and Veza just using his physicality to take hits and fall forward and had a 21-yard touchdown run. So overall, great game from him.
Definitely a great playing by the Dukes, and they're going to have to do that again this week against Loyola. Loyola, you've definitely heard the name, considering the fact that they played Cincinnati Powerhouse with notable alum as Luke Kuechly. If you're a football fan, you know that name. That's St. Xavier High School. They played each other at Loyola on ESPN. Yes, the main channel, the nationally broadcast one. So this team is no joke. This team is considered by most to be one of the biggest powerhouses in Illinois and one of the biggest powerhouses in the state. And their only loss came to Mount Carmel by 7 in a loss of 44-37 at home versus Mount Carmel. And this Mount Carmel team is nasty. Great Mount Carmel team. They've got to roll through 7A. They have been rolling so far. They're going to continue rolling to a 7A state championship. So great team that they lost to, and they've played a really tough schedule with 10 playoff opponents.
Wow.
10 of 12 have been playoff opponents, and it's quite incredible. The only two that have not been have been East Moline United and then St. Patrick Shamrocks. Only 2 teams that they've played that they have not made the playoffs. So it's a very tough schedule, and they dominate at home. And that's the best thing for York, is that they're at home. Loyola currently outscores their opponents at home by nearly 30 points a game, but then on the road it's a mere 18 points a game.
Which is why you need to be there on Saturday. The
You
louder you cheer, the warmer you feel. It's going to be cold, but we still need you out there to support the Dukes.
You know, we're gonna be streaming the game, thankfully, this week. But if you can make it, you should make it. You need to make it this week. The Dukes needs your help this week. The fans do make a difference. These are high schoolers. They're not the most mentally tough people in the world. It gets in their head. They're not using radio communication, so the talking between the offensive line about blitz packages and protection packages can get messed up with your voice. So be there, be the voice, be loud, get excited, and help the Dukes move on to their first ever state final. And it's going to be no easy task, as Loyola is a dominant team with a lot of great players, and it starts with their quarterback. That's Jake Stearney. Colgate commit so far this year has been 71% completion percentage for 1,656 yards, 26 touchdowns through the air, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Based on what I've seen and what I've read, this is the best throwing quarterback in the state. And that's going to be a tough task for the Dukes. And the Dukes are known for the run defense, as Loyola's coach admits, saying that they are daring you to run with their linebacker package. They see only 3 down linemen, and they're daring people to run. But those linebackers of Grazzini, Massieri, of Jacob Young, of Cole Ostendorf, are amazing run defenders and are able to plug those gaps in those holes and be able to create tackles for losses. So they dare you to run, but they make it even harder to pass. So the Dukes' pass defense has been great this year. As you said, they capped it off with a few interceptions, one by David Locke, one by Reese Richardson, and there was a huge interception in the game before by Matt Sutter. So this pass defense is no joke, but they're going to be facing their toughest competition in terms of quarterback so far this year. But the thing that gives the Dukes a lot of hope is the fact that the Dukes have played better position groups at every position except for quarterback. Wide receivers, Dermot Smith, not Dermot Smith, that's the quarterback. John Nestor, the Iowa commit for Marist. Ryan Sims, the Miami, Ohio commit for Marist. Better wide receiver room, right? Tight ends, Yale commit, Graham Smith from Lions. Better than Loyola's tight ends. Glenbard West offensive line. Better than Loyola's offensive line. And then the defensive end, there's a lot, but there's a lot of playmakers on this Loyola defense. They're arguably the best defense we've faced so far this year. And they're great. They have a lot of playmakers. They have number 99, 6'6", 280 Michigan commit, Brooks Barr. Not the best mover off the ball, but he's massive. And that strikes intimidation to a lot of offensive linemen. But I have full belief in Don Begora, Ellis McAdoo, Lazar Todorchev to be able to stand up to the competition and be able to successfully run block and pass block against them. And then they also have a great DB in John McGuire, number 33, an amazing safety who just roams around and makes freaky tackles. He's freaky fast. So watch out for him on cutting off those jet sweeps, cutting off those screen passes. He's going to be a big factor, and the Dukes are going to need to limit him. And most likely, Anthony Mancini is going to be tasked with blocking him for the majority of the day whenever they do those screen passes. So it's going to be a lot up to him to be able to limit John McGuire's effectiveness. Is there anything about Loyola's playoffs history that leads you to believe that this is going to be an even tougher task than just looking at the record and looking at the roster of this team?
Well, yeah, just to quickly close on what you were saying, it's gonna be tough. I mean, this is like the third and fourth week in a row that we were just playing athletes. Athletes at every position. It's no longer we can just beat them with speed, beat them with size, because they are as big and as fast. So it's just gonna become another coaching chess match, which I believe Fitz can win because he's won up to this point. So this is by far the biggest test for York. But we've gotten all the way here. We've broken every barrier that we've been faced with. So I just think it's going to be another great playoff game that we've seen so many of thus far. And it's just going to come down to the good coaching and just the overall performance of the players, as one would assume. But moving on to Loyola's past playoff success, it's a little bit different to York, safe to say. Loyola has been here before from basically the beginning of their program. They've made the IHSA playoffs for 32 years compared to York's 20. York has a losing record, 14-19 in playoff games. Loyola has a whopping 69 wins and 28 losses, making the championship game 8 times with a record of 3-5. So 3 state championships. This is only the 3rd or 4th time that York has made the semifinals in their history. So Loyola has been here before, and that's one of the things that does scare me, is just the experience difference. But I truly believe that this Dukes team is confident enough that confidence and sort of just riding the wave and riding the support of the fans is going to help carry them to make this a very even game. So Loyola definitely the more experienced team when it comes to like big games deep in the season, the playoffs, the conditioning, all that. They've been there before, but I still believe in the Dukes.
Yeah, definitely. And the Dukes also kind of have an interesting luck on their side, is they've made the two state semifinals prior, and they've both been away games. In 1995 and 2006, the teams went respectively 11-2 and 10-3, and both losses came against Wheaton, Warrenville South. 11 years apart, same team has knocked off the Dukes. Well, as we've said today a lot, we're facing Loyola Academy. That's not Wheaton, Warrenville South. So,
and we're at home.
So the Dukes have a big advantage going into this. The Dukes are going to be playing a very tough team. They have big wide receivers. Declan Ford, who's been amazing this year, a real big play threat for Loyola. He's been 31 catches for 605 yards and 10 touchdowns on the regular season. And then on the other side, they have someone, and he's 6'2", 175, someone who's even bigger, 6'3", 185, and that's going to be It's going to be Spencer Ledbetter, who's kind of the big play threat, who really had a great game against St. Xavier and had another great game against Mount Carmel. So he steps up in big situations. And then those great wide receivers have led to the best offense in the state of Illinois with 506 points for and averaging nearly 43 points per game. An incredible offense going against the Duke's amazing defense. And it's going to basically just be
strength on strength.
The unstoppable force versus the immovable object, as those sportscasters out there like to say. And it's going to be a big dog fight, and we're going to see, will it be a passing game? Will it be a running game? We'll see how the weather affects it. That's going to be a big aspect. It's going to be in the high 20s tomorrow, and it's going to be a very, very, very cold day. Very cold to the bone day. But nonetheless, the Dukes are going to fight through it and expect a great game no matter what. It's going to be a great game. And come out, support the Dukes, help them on their quest for the first ever state final appearance and eventually, hopefully, the first ever state championship for Dukes football.
Go Dukes.
Go Dukes.